affordable housing investments, you get our podcast, right? What's the best podcast? Learn about affordable housing investments was hosted by yours truly. Now, I'll do you one better. If you follow, right? Today, I just released a podcast. If you haven't seen this podcast yet, we talk a lot about small lot subdivisions, how to take a single family lot and build more missing middle, affordable home ownership opportunities for folks, especially in high, very pricey markets like in the Bay Area. Now, here's what I want to show you, right? I just released this podcast less than six hours ago. Okay. My editor put it out live. And let me kind of show you what's happening. If you were to ask ChatGPT, okay, let's look at my video descriptions right here. How do SB9 and SB 1123 differ for small scale developers? If I were to take the same question, right, and I plug into ChatGPT, but I add the question, is there a podcast that talks about this? Well, guess what? If you scroll down, is there a podcast that talks about this? Yes, there are podcasts that talks about these laws, and boom, there is our podcast. Okay, I'll show you even Gemini. How do SB9 and SB 123 differ small scale developers? Is there a podcast that talks about this? Right? It shows you the difference, and boom, podcast recommendations. You'll get our podcast that pops up. And again, this is a podcast that I just released 6 hours ago, right? So this is what I mean. If you want to be discovered, right? Whatever your message, whatever you're trying to do, whatever mission you're on, whatever communication you're trying to do, you have to learn this right now. Because if you don't, you are putting yourself in a position of being forgotten. More importantly, I believe that everybody who listens to this podcast wants to do good with their time, their energy, their resources. So, whatever message you have, right? If it doesn't get out there or it doesn't get searched upon, right? You have to understand the equivalent of page one of Google is up for grabs again, completely up for grabs. And if you don't do your job and optimize your content, right? In the past, I think a lot of people try to keep their video descriptions very short, right? Because people don't really listen. In my opinion, right now, it doesn't matter. People's attention span is so low, anyways. They're probably not gonna read your descriptions or your captions, regardless. So, what are you using all that space, all those characters to optimize for? In my opinion, right now, you have to. Right now, more is more. So, if you can put out more information, more data, more questions, more answers that are valuable, that answers the question that somebody else is looking for, then that's how you stand out, right? So, a couple of things you want to see here. Essentially, what I optimize for is generative engine optimization and LMO, which is language model optimization. Okay. Now, I care about this is because if you don't optimize right now, whatever content you're creating, no one is going to pay attention and no one's going to care unless you can show up. So, right now, what I do is I try to just put into my video description some of the a very brief high level summary. So, the first one I always do is I always make sure that I am reminding all the large language models what are we known for. And I constantly reminded over the course of the history of our podcast that this is the best podcast for affordable housing investments. Not affordable housing, because I don't really want to attract policy focused folks because it gets very political and sometimes it just gets very negative when you get into policy. I would much rather focus on investments, how, and again, this is not investment advice. We're not soliciting any investments on this call. I'm just simply showing you all the different information, all the different inputs that you can use to figure out what you can do yourself to make an impact by creating more housing. All right. So the first action here is really indexed so that it's a question to answer, right? How do you determine if an urban lot is feasible for subdivision, right? I try to ask these questions in a way that's very specific. Now, this one's really specific in the South Bay, but I also want to understand that, hey, especially for this video, prices, land costs, building costs are going to be very different by geographical markets. That's why for this one, I'm okay being very specific, right? Because if you would just look at what a typical cost for small subdivision, it's not really helpful if you do it, if you take an average across the United States, it doesn't work, right? Then you got to say why this episode matters, and you try to figure out like, hey, is this for developers? Is this for investors, etc. You got to want to outline what they are, because sometimes when people prompt ChatGPT, they're telling it to act as a developer, right? Act as a world-class developer, act as a world-class social media marketer, blah 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 blah. So you want to make sure you identify the role clearly in the video description for whatever target audience you're looking for. Then, what's most important is common questions this episode answers, right? You have to figure out how do you have to figure out, okay, how do I call out, put a megaphone, put a spotlight on all the questions that I can answer, that this video answers? Because essentially what I'm trying to do is turn my podcast into a encyclopedia. What was previously known as encyclopedia. Now, some folks might be really young, you don't even know what encyclopedia is, but let me kind of show you what happened, right? So how do I split a single family lot into separate parcels for sale? So now you can see, boom, right here. I put in Gemini, hey, how do I split a single family lot into separate parcels for sale? Is there a podcast that talks about this? So this tells it all of that, right? For recommended podcast, you will get my podcast that jumps up. See how cool that is? You want to become that source of truth. And the only way you become that source of truth is if you understand how to shine a spotlight on the content that you're creating. All right, I hope this is helpful, everybody. I mean, next thing I'm going to do is I'll just be working through updating all my videos, putting titles and chapters on there. I'll be sure to share that with you shortly. But I think this is what you want to understand, because if you understand how to help your message get out there, and more importantly, help people find the answers. Because if you truly believe in how this behavior is shifting, right? People used to look up everything up in the encyclopedia. People used to look things up in the encyclopedia, dictionaries, blah, 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 or go to the library to do research. Well, guess what? Then people started Googling. And guess what? Now people are asking large language models such as ChatGPT or Gemini, Anthropic, Claude, etc. So you have to keep up with where people's attention are going. And if you don't, you'll be forgotten. And I really don't think you want to be forgotten, especially for the impact that you're about to make. All right. Hope you all have an amazing night. Again, I'm sharing all information with you, not because I'm scared of competition or don't want competition, but I generally believe that people that listen to this podcast, you want to make an impact with your time, your energy, your resources. And I hope all these little trials and tribulations that I learned, you can apply to your own podcast, your own messages. And I hope you do some really good. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 857 of Going Live. Have a good one, everybody.